South Bend still coping after record flooding a year ago today. This evening, we're bringing you back to that night that changed everything for some South Bend families. Thank you for joining us here at 6 as we continue to chronicle August 15, 2016, an historic day for Michiana. I'm Brian Dorman.
And I'm Colleen Borman. A year ago to the day, rain started falling in South Bend and did not stop until streets turned into streams. Again at 6, we have live team coverage in some of South Bend's most affected areas. Families lost their homes to the floods, and some are left with the memories of being stranded in the water. ABC 57's Deanna Gutierrez standing by on South Bend's Jackson Road, where one family lost everything. But we'll start with ABC 57 Chief Meteorologist Tom Coombs on Twickenham Drive this evening. Tom?
Yeah, Colleen, we spent the bulk of our 90 minutes of news bringing you back to August 15th, 2016, and explaining why the flooding created such problems for those living in the hardest hit areas. Now, we're going to be pushing the story forward. We're going to present you with a truth that may be hard for some of you to agree with. The heavy flooding was likely caused or impacted and greatly impacted by climate change. It's not a secret that Michiana has always seen wacky weather, but last year's rain was a whole different ballgame. He's no stranger to weird weather.
You know, you grow up here, you're used to blizzards. You're used to the occasional severe storm, maybe even producing a tornado. But to be honest, we don't think about floods very much.
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg grew up here.
It was painful. You know, it really hurts to go around your community and talk to people, neighbors, residents, who are dealing with, in many cases, the worst day of their lives.
And after living the worst day of their lives, many neighbors might be wondering why.
I think a lot of the coverage around climate change talks about places like the North Pole and the Arctic Circle and Antarctica and Alaska.
This climate change story has nothing to do with polar bears, but instead the faces and places impacted by devastating rainfall.
I think the national conversation on climate change ought to talk more about places like South Bend. You know, it happens here too, and we experienced that in a very real and very difficult way on August 15th. I'm very worried as a mayor that there could be more where this came from.
Many of you skeptical to the idea of climate change might be saying you don't care because it doesn't impact you. Mayor Pete and the ABC 57 First Warning Neighborhood Weather Team are challenging you to broaden your view.
Imagine if extreme weather events like that continue to happen more and more often. What's going to happen to you? Are you sure that that your home, your neighborhood, your car, your job won't be impacted by that in some way? Look, we've got to do something now or we're going to pay a price later. And what August 15th taught us is that later is not so far off.
Now, Mayor Pete went on to tell me he's working to beat that problem to the punch. He says he's making South Bend an easier walk and bike city. That's some small steps, and it's easy for the city just to do that. But, you know, as you go downtown, you can also see that. But you can see those green bikes and, of course, the hundreds of bike lanes and those green line bikes across the area. All right, I've got some more information I want to share with you. Earlier at 5:30, we shared you a rough snapshot of what could be a changing climate for the Midwest and the Michiana area. And what I want to show you now is another study. This is done by Climate Central. It's a different methodology, but a similar result. It looks at the top 1% of rain events. This shows a sharper increase in heavy rain events for Indiana. Notice again a sharp rise towards the 2000s. And here's the same study done across the lower 48 of the U.S. Almost all of the states have seen a more than 20% increase in heavy downpours. This is more than just a fluke in the weather pattern. This is climate change. Long-term trends that we have taken for granted are changing and becoming less predictable, and the standard norm is becoming more extreme. And that's what we're talking about with climate change. We're used to warm summers, cold winters, a certain amount of rainfall. A heavy rain could be about 2 inches, but the 3, 4, and 5-inch rain events are what are really extreme. And I want to show you this. Why, with a warmer climate, are we getting more rainfall? Well, with warmer climate, we get a warmer atmosphere. A warmer atmosphere evaporates more precipitation, more water out of the grass, out of the ground, out of the trees, out of you and me. That creates that stifling humidity and is fuel for heavy rain. And that greater potential is there for flooding rainfall and extreme rainfall more often. thanks to, again, a warming climate and climate change. We're at greater risk, and it's something that the Michiana area may have to start planning for more often and more frequently. And let's get back to some other stories, some of the real people impacted by this flood. We told you at 5, Bethel College committed itself to helping families that were displaced. ABC 57's Diana Gutierrez joins us along Jackson Road in South Bend, where a family benefited from the generosity in watching nearly everything disappear. Diana?
That's right, Tom. Well, the owner of this property tells me it's hard to believe that a year has actually gone by, but I want to walk you through the scene here. So behind me here is where Chris Elmrick used to live. This beige house here, we're talking about 4 inches of damage. But if I pan over this way to this house, well, half of what you can see here is where his aunt and cousin used to live. And over here on this side, this blue house was being renovated at the time of the flooding. But a year ago today, Elmrick had to make a very tough decision.
At the same time, we thought about, do we move right away? Do we up and just move like some of the other, residents in this area?
Almost 90 years of inherited property damaged and torn apart because of the devastating South Bend flood.
It's hard. My great-grandparents had this property since 1930, and there's never been any type of situation happen like this.
Chris Elmrick returned from a camping trip a year ago and did not expect the series of events that would unfold that night.
And we came outside and said, what? It's just rain. And walked 2 houses down, and we already had 2 foot of water. Within about an hour, we had over 4 foot of water.
Elmrick's 3.5 acres of land submerged.
It was definitely crazy. At that point, we were just trying to get the family and everybody safe that were in the apartments down the street.
4 full seasons, 365 days, and Chris Elmrick and his family have not yet received the financial aid they need to come back home.
We were hoping to not still be in temporary housing after a year, and that there's no clause there, and so no coverage was to be given. And we have never lived in a floodplain either, wasn't ever deemed as a floodplain. So nobody here had flood insurance either.
Elmrick says step 1 is getting the damaged homes removed. His hope is to have everything ready by spring.
Family was the most important, just getting everybody out. Everything else was a material item. We're still going through that now.
Now, this home behind me here is being condemned by the county. Elmrick says in total he's looking at $450,000 in damages. And while he thanks Bethel College for their generosity, he's surprised that this property value is actually increasing with time. I'm live in South Bend. Diana Gutierrez, ABC 57 News.
Thank you very much, Diana. And that does it for our look back on South Bend's record rainfall 1 year later. And the biggest thing I think we want you to take away from all this is South Bend learned a lot from that wild weather just a year ago, and that climate change absolutely impacts your life in one way or another. Everything that we talked about during this 90 minutes of news, there's a lot to go over. You may want to read through it. You may want to watch it again to become more familiar with what we talked about, and including a full interview with Mayor Pete Buttigieg. You can find that all from our 90 minutes of news right now on abc57.com. You'll find that full interview with Mayor Pete, breakdowns by Emily Kennedy, and we'll talk more about climate change and that past climate record. But